Okay, so last time our heroes had just gotten their girl to the chopper and reunited with an upgraded old friend. Unfortunately, this friend was left with a few new orifices after dealing with a certain dancing vampire, and fixing this requires very specialized equipment. As such, there's only one thing to do. Run to Mama! Welcome back to my Metal Gear Retrospective. Yep, we're still talking about Metal Gear Solid 4, and as Raiden pointed out at the end of our last session, Snake and the gang are apparently heading to Europe to find and meet someone going by the name of Big Mama. Yes, that's really the name they're going with, and no, I can't take it seriously either. Just who is Big Mama though? Well, she's the leader of a resistance group, and as mentioned last time, she helped Raiden save Sonny from the Patriots. In exchange for this, Raiden helped her find the body of Big Boss, which she supposedly now has in her possession. She also has equipment that can fix Raiden's injuries, so yeah, probably a good idea to seek her out. We'll get to all of that though, but first, Naomi spends some time explaining exactly what Liquid's been doing and why he's after Big Boss's body. Apparently, those tests he ran in the Middle East and South America was him proving a bit of a theory he and Naomi had regarding his and Snake's DNA. It turns out that they're not all that identical after all. You see, SOP apparently uses an authentication system based on the genetic code and biometrics of, you guessed it, Big Boss. As Liquid and Snake are clones of him though, you should have been able to gain access using their DNA as well, but after attempting to do just that, Liquid confirmed that his and Snake's genetic codes are actually different from their father's. All of this explains the need to create a more perfect clone in the form of Solidus, and it also explains how Snake survived the Fox die on Shadow Moses. It also means that the only way for Liquid to gain full control of SOP is to use Big Boss himself, but as Snake points out, he would also need his biometrics, which shouldn't exist anymore on account of him being dead and all, right?
No. He's alive.
Big Boss is alive.
His body is. Or rather, his cells.
That's impossible.
Yeah, I think I've got to side with Snake on this one. Not because people coming back from the dead would be that much of a stretch for this series, but because Big Boss didn't just die. He was lit on fire by a makeshift blowtorch before he blew up and evaporated. As far as deaths go, I'd say that one's pretty fucking permanent. Kojima seemingly disagrees with me on that one though, as Naomi claims Big Boss is indeed still alive. Sort of. Apparently, someone somehow recovered his body after Snake defeated him and managed to keep his cells alive as a so-called biomort. Basically, he's a brain-dead vegetative husk of remnants kept alive through artificial means. This still doesn't add up, but it is the explanation they're sticking to, continuity be damned. That means that Snake has to head to Eastern Europe in order to find Big Mama, get Raiden fixed up, and retrieve this body before Liquid can. Feels like a good time for some spontaneous geek lovin' to me too. Yeah, you know how Naomi and Otacon have had maybe 3 conversations, mostly about what Liquid's up to? Apparently, that was foreplay for them, as they end up spending their first night together bonking in a helicopter. Now, I'm not completely against these two getting together, as they do seem like a decent fit, but they barely know each other, and wow, are their interactions awkward. Either way, the team then heads for Eastern Europe, which, by the way, is as specific as we ever get here. Once there though, it initially seems like we're no longer following Snake, but it turns out he's just testing out his new face camo. Not that it helps for long, considering he deliberately creates a scene at the nearest security checkpoint. Way to remain inconspicuous, jerkweed! Luckily, Meryl shows up before things go too far and convinces the guards that Snake's with her. This may temporarily keep him off their radar, but Akiba nearly ruins this immediately afterwards because, well, he's an idiot.
Hey, Snake! Over here! Hey, Snake!
What is wrong with that guy?
You mean besides the fact that he has the mental capacity of a walnut? Seriously, what the hell was that about? No way this guy survived 10 years of service. He must have been shot at some point. Which would actually explain quite a lot when I think about it. Anyway, while Meryl once again tries to convince Snake to leave Liquid to her and her newly increased army, this unsurprisingly doesn't work. As such, she reluctantly lets Snake continue his mission, which leads to a fairly drawn-out and rather boring sequence where Snake has to track down Big Mama's hideout. How? By tailing a member of her resistance group. In order to find this resistance member, you're given a new device called a signal interceptor. This somewhat obviously intercepts PMC transmission signals regarding the resistance, which allows you to narrow down the location of their members. The thing is though that while this device may seem rather useful, you never actually need to use it at all. Honestly, at the beginning of this sequence, they very clearly highlight the resistance member you need to follow, and if you do so without dilly-dallying too much, it should be pretty easy to keep track of him. I guess the signal interceptor can be useful if you somehow manage to lose track of this guy, but again, that's not all that likely to happen. Once Snake makes it to Big Mama's hideout though, he suddenly decides to ditch the stealthy approach in favor of roughing up a few guards and basically brute forcing his way in. Before things get too brutal though, Snake is halted by Big Mama herself, who seems to know Snake quite a bit more than he expected.
My, how you've grown, David. It was you, not I, who was created from the rib of man. But I gave you life. I am your mother.
No. It's not true. That's impossible!
Actually, it's not. It turns out that Big Mama really is a mama, which I guess makes her name slightly better? Nah, it's still pretty damn stupid. I mean, she's not even a little pudgy, so why the hell are you calling her big? That's just insulting. Either way, it turns out that Big Mama was actually a fairly significant part of the Les Enfants Terribles project that spawned Snake and his brothers. Basically, she volunteered to be a surrogate so she could carry and give birth to Big Boss's children. You see, she fell in love with him after they worked together during Operation Snake Eater. Yep, Big Mama is none other than Eva. Okay, alright, so you probably figured that one out already, but yeah, that's Big Mama's big secret. That's certainly not all she has to say though, as the next few minutes are spent listening to her dole out quite a bit of exposition and backstory about the founding of the Patriots. I'll try to summarize as best as I can, but trust me, that's easier said than done. After the events of MGS3, Major Zero, Big Boss's commander at the time, used the funds he gathered from Claiming the Philosopher's Legacy to form the organization that would eventually become the Patriots. The goal of this organization was to carry out what Zero believed to be the final wishes of the boss, a world unified under a single governing body, i.e. them. In order to form this organization, Zero recruited pretty much everyone who took part in Operation Snake Eater, as they all had a similar affinity and reverence for the boss. More specifically, he recruited Big Boss, Sigint, Paramedic, and Ocelot, who stayed in the Soviet acting as an undercover informant for the group. Eva also joined their ranks after Big Boss found and rescued her in Hanoi. In order to inspire and lead the world, Zero felt that they also needed an idol of sorts, someone their followers could all look up to as an inspiration, and he felt Big Boss would be perfect for this role. He therefore began to fabricate, exaggerate, and spread various myths and stories about his favorite soldier, eventually elevating him into a living legend. Unfortunately, Big Boss and Zero eventually started to drift apart as Zero sought more and more power, believing the boss would want a world controlled by a single will, while Big Boss felt her wish was a world where soldiers could be free from government control. Big Boss also resented the way his former commander started using him as some sort of puppet. Realizing that the Patriots might eventually need to replace their idol, Zero started working on the Les Enfants Terribles project behind Big Boss's back. With the help of Paramedic, also known as Dr. Clark, they eventually managed to successfully fertilize an egg provided by her assistant. Eva was then artificially inseminated with this egg and eventually gave birth to Solid and Liquid. This proved to be the final straw for Big Boss, who broke away from the Patriots shortly thereafter and began setting up the mercenary nation that would eventually become known as Outer Heaven. Meanwhile, Zero somehow managed to acquire an immense amount of resources and influence, eventually leading to the Patriots taking hold and controlling pretty much everything in the world. Confused yet? Me too! I mean, why would Big Boss join Zero if he didn't agree with his plans? How could Zero start cloning Big Boss without him knowing? And how in Dungville could 5 fucking people manage to infiltrate and take over every single nation on the planet? Seriously, there's contrived writing, and then it's just not giving a shit! As if all of that isn't already a massive stretch, they decide to take it even further. You see, after Solid Snake stopped Big Boss's attempts to overthrow Zero in Outer Heaven and Zanzibar Land, Zero somehow recovered his former friend's body. Again, this body seemingly crumbled into less than dust the last time we saw it, but maybe Zero had a dust buster or something, I don't know. Either way, Zero apparently couldn't bring himself to accept the loss of his idolized friend, and he no longer trusted silly humans to make any decisions for themselves. As such, he somehow managed to create a system of AIs that now control everything, and he locked away Big Boss's husk of a body in an undisclosed location in order to keep him alive as sort of a messiah figure. Seems reasonable. This didn't exactly sit well with Eva and Ocelot though, who decided Zero and the others had to die. To begin with, they used Grey Fox to kill Paramedic, and Ocelot managed to torture and not so accidentally kill Sigint, aka DARPA Chief Donald Anderson, during Shadow Moses. They also enlisted Naomi, who actually developed Foxdie specifically to wipe out any remaining Patriots. Unfortunately, Zero still remained active, and after Ocelot transformed into Liquid after having his arm grafted onto his body, Eva was on her own. Luckily, she then met Raiden, who provided her with the location of Big Boss. How exactly did he find this info? Well, apparently it was among the data recovered from GW, the AI core Snake and Raiden destroyed during the Big Shell incident. Huh, that's funny. I seem to recall Snake and Otacon being in possession of that particular data. In fact, I'm fairly certain MDS2 ended with Otacon filling Snake in on the rather strange contents of that very disc. Unless Raiden somehow stole it back from them without Snake or Otacon ever suspecting a thing, he shouldn't be able to hand Eva so much as a clue. However Raiden got her this data, Eva eventually managed to retrieve Big Boss's body, which is now stored in one of her vans, ready to move at a moment's notice. After Snake receives a call from Otacon informing him that Naomi has disappeared though, it seems that time may already have come, as these weird machines disguised in a trench coat suddenly interrupt them. These three-armed balls are essentially little automated scouts known as scarabs. You'll have to deal with quite a few of these buggers over the course of the game, but luckily they're not really all that tough. Or they can get a bit annoying as they tend to travel in rather large numbers, and they are able to cling onto and stun you for a bit, but they're usually harmless enough. The scarab showing up is a definite sign that it's time to move though, as we enter a pretty decent, if slightly lengthy and lackluster on-rails section. Basically, you just have to keep Liquid's troops away from Big Boss's van, while Eva drives you to your destination. This is a pretty easy task to accomplish, especially if you have a few rations on hand, as you also get infinite ammo here. After quite a few grunts have been mowed down though, Raging Raven shows up along with a few unmanned drones and eventually blows the van and Eva's motorcycle off the road. While Eva suffers a bit of a deja vu injury, both she and Snake survives the crash as Snake heads to the top of this tower to shoot down a certain flying menace. Why does that sound so familiar?
I've got to go and swat a noisy fly.
As expected, this leads us to another boss fight, and although it's certainly not horrid, it is, if anything, a bit on the underwhelming side. You basically just have to avoid Raven's missiles and shoot her with your weapon of choice whenever possible. This can take a bit of time, and it's not necessarily all that easy to avoid those missiles, but all in all, this isn't really all that challenging. After Raven falls down from the sky and Snake puts her beauty form to sleep, he returns to Eva, who decides this is the time to fill him in on a bit of a secret. As it turns out, they were never actually guarding Big Boss after all.
The 3 vans that came out with us are decoys. The real one is floating down the river, headed downstream. I managed to get in touch with the children. The Pix is safe. We're going to rendezvous on the riverbank, downstream.
Yeah, apparently that whole chase sequence was just another diversion, which I'm not sure why Eva couldn't tell Snake earlier. Either way, this does mean that Snake and Eva need to get to this river, where a cruiser is supposedly waiting to bring them and Big Boss to safety. After using the sewers to reach their destination though, someone is unfortunately there waiting for them.
Liquid. Not bad.
Where's the Pix?
That no longer matters.
Where is it?
Is that it?
No, Snake, of course that's not it. Eva just collapsed in agonizing grief because someone set fire to a collection of vintage books. Seriously, how dense are you? This isn't the only surprise here though, as it seems Naomi has betrayed Snake and the others. Apparently she didn't just disappear, she actually ran back to Liquid and told them all about where to find Big Boss's body. She shouldn't really know anything about this whole van bluff thing though, but I guess Liquid could have figured that out on his own. Somehow. Either way, Liquid does now have Big Boss in his possession, and Snake and Eva are more than outnumbered and outgunned. While this is definitely bad news, Snake points out that Liquid still won't have full control of the SOP system, just the military aspect of it. Unfortunately, Liquid already has something that could grant him full access. GW. Yeah, remember that AI that was believed to be destroyed during the Big Shell incident? Turns out it was only broken up into fragments, which Liquid managed to piece together and place in sort of a ghost state within SOP itself. This means that JD, the AI that currently has supreme authority, will be unable to detect GW as a threat, which could therefore be used to take over the system. Basically, Liquid plans to blow up JD with a nuclear strike, which will transfer supreme authority of the entire SOP system to GW and Liquid. He then plans to kill Zero and Big Boss and rebuild the world with him as the only remaining Patriot and ruler of everything. In other words, things seem pretty fucked. After punching, stabbing, and even electrocuting Snake for a bit, Liquid and his crew takes off into the river, where their path is quickly blocked by Meryl, her rats, and a ridiculously huge army. Yeah, Liquid is quite a threat, but the military don't know a thing about the whole SOP situation, and yet they get up as if they're facing off against Thanos or something. I mean, what the hell? It's not like this overwhelming show of force really makes any difference though, apart from possibly making things worse. You see, once Liquid and his crew are surrounded and he's seemingly preparing to open fire, Meryl orders her army to do the same, and yeah, you should be able to tell where this is going.
What? The system is mine! Your guns and your weapons are no longer your own. Behold, guns of the Patriots. Bang! Bang!
Okay, a few questions here. How did Liquid already use Big Boss's DNA to access SOP when he just got his body a few moments ago? How does the system register his stupid finger guns as actual commands? And why the hell isn't Snake just using one of his many non-ID guns to end all of this right now? Honestly, none of this makes any fucking sense. However this is all supposed to work, Liquid does somehow shut down everyone else's weaponry and also causes them all to fall down convulsing like in the Middle East. He then opens fire, basically slaughtering probably hundreds of soldiers. The rats are also knocked overboard after being blasted with a cannon, which also sets their boat on fire. Before leaving, Liquid also has Vamp toss Big Boss's body onto the rats' burning boat, and while Eva attempts to save him, she is unfortunately not immune to fire. Snake manages to pull her back to safety though, but ends up getting severely burned on the left side of his face after Liquid causes an explosion by shooting Big Boss's remains. However that's supposed to work. Meryl's not doing too well either, as Akiba may have managed to get her onto dry land, but she doesn't appear to be breathing. After giving her quite a bit of CPR though, she does eventually sputter back to life, something that also forces Akiba to remove his balaclava for the first time. Yeah, they set this up as if it's some big reveal, but it turns out Akiba's just some guy. I don't get it. Either way, Snake and Eva also share a moment together before she succumbs to her injuries and dies in his arms. After getting back to Otacon with a little help from Drebin, Snake is shown footage captured by the Mark II of Liquid discussing his plans with his team. While he still plans to destroy JD with a nuke, he'll need one that's not in the system, and it seems he's found one: Metal Gear Rex. In case you forgot, Rex was equipped with a so-called railgun that was capable of launching a completely undetectable stealth warhead. As Rex, and by extension this weapon, was made well before the implementation of the SOP system, it could potentially be used to destroy JD without anyone, not even the Patriots, being able to do anything about it. While all of this is clearly spelled out in the footage Otacon obtained though, neither he, Snake, nor Campbell managed to figure out how Liquid plans to launch a nuke. Not at first anyway. Seriously, they spent several minutes discussing what Liquid might be up to before they pieced together that him talking about using Rex could mean that he plans to use Rex. Great work, detectives! Seriously, how the hell did they not figure this out immediately? They mention Rex several times in that video, and somehow you don't draw the connection between that and Liquid needing an uncontrolled nuke? What did you think he was talking about? His fucking dog? It also seems GW not only gave Liquid access to SOP, it gave him the exact location of where JD is stored, in orbit around the Earth disguised as debris. All of this ultimately means that Snake will have to return to Shadow Moses in the hopes of finding and disabling Rex's railgun before Liquid can get to it. Yup, it's time for one hell of a nostalgia-laden fanboy trip. They do start off rather small though by reintroducing us to Mei Ling. Apparently, she's now the captain of the USS Missouri, an old battleship used as some sort of training vessel, as she calls Otacon from there to confirm that Liquid and his vessel, Outer Haven, is indeed at Shadow Moses. She also confirms that Rex should still be there, as the island was abandoned after Snake's last visit. In any case, this means it's time to return to where it all began for a lot, if not most fans of this series, and I mean that quite literally. As you should be able to see, the very next segment of this game is actually taken straight from the original Metal Gear Solid. Really, I'm not faking this, they honestly just copy-paste the opening segment of the PS1 classic. Like I said, it's nostalgia time. Actually, this was apparently just a dream, as Snake wakes up just in time for his true arrival on Shadow Moses. Unfortunately, there's a bit of a snowstorm going on, which does affect visibility, but this can be somewhat alleviated by using the night vision mode of the Solid Eye. This is definitely something you'll want to utilize as well, as you're not exactly alone in the snow here. You see, the island is actually crawling with unmanned machines of the Gecko and Scarab variety. Most of these can be avoided easily enough, but you may actually want to destroy at least a few of them. After all, this will not only make things a bit easier, it will also grant you quite a few extra Drebin points. However you choose to get around these machines, Snake will eventually make his way to the nuclear warhead storage building. Although the plan was to just use the hangar doors in the back to get to Rex, it seems Snake will have to take a bit of an additional detour, as these doors are unfortunately locked. This means heading down to Otacon's old office to log into the base security. And before you ask, no, this is obviously not just another way to pad out the game and pander a bit more to the fans. Absolutely not. Okay, so that door will actually still be locked when you get back to it, meaning they could easily have cut this whole thing, but no, it's certainly not just busy work. It's blatant busy work. Honestly, there's not really anything about this segment worth mentioning. It is just an excuse to revisit a few more familiar areas. Once you have and Otacon actually starts unlocking those blast doors though, it turns out that the geckos can apparently fit inside and operate elevators as well, as one of them happens to be right on Snake and Otacon's tail. Seems conveniently unlucky enough. As unlocking those doors also take fucking ages for some reason, Snake has no choice but to keep that gecko away from the Mark III. While there are several ways to do this, one of, if not the easiest, involve using empty ammo clips. Just chuck one of them away from the Mark III every so often, and the gecko will remain distracted and won't even approach you. Yeah, it really is that simple. This isn't the only obstacle in your way though, as it seems Crying Wolf is lying in wait in the snowfield ahead. She also has a pretty substantial squad of frogs helping her out, so the following battle is definitely one of the more challenging ones. It can also be rather time consuming, as this is, rather expectedly, more or less a sniper battle. Kind of. You see, while you and Wolf will mostly be trying to shoot each other from a distance, she will also attempt to charge directly into you with her four-legged battlesuit once in a while. This isn't really much of a challenge to avoid, but you do need to keep an eye out. You also have to pay attention to and deal with all the frogs running around, so this certainly isn't just a sniper battle. It's not like you can just shoot at Wolf anytime you see her either. As mentioned, she is running around in her reinforced armor, which your weapons can't really do much about. As such, you'll have to wait for the times when she pops out of this shell to fire her railgun and shoot her before she spots and shoots you. In other words, this is a pretty great boss fight. After Wolf is eventually defeated, Snake picks up her gun and continues towards Rex, which as luck would have it, is still in the exact spot he last saw it. Not so luckily, it seems its railgun has already been removed, as Vamp suddenly shows up with a weirdly affectionate Naomi. Yeah, apparently she's his queen now, and Vamp has already received his first decree from her.
This place will be your grave, as my queen wishes. The suicide gecko are on their way. Soon, there'll be nothing left of this place.
Wait, is this a joke? You seriously expect us to buy this incredibly convincing performance from Naomi? For fuck's sake, she's shown absolutely nothing even resembling these type of emotions for anyone up until now, so yeah, I'm sure her sudden interest in Vamp is completely real. Just like her newfound desire to annihilate Snake must be. I mean, it's just so believable! Seriously, how the hell doesn't Vamp see right through this? Naomi even grabs for his knife when she gets the chance, but I'm sure that's just some kinky form of foreplay, huh? She couldn't possibly be manipulating you in the hopes of killing you while her back is turned. That would just make too much sense. Her little show here doesn't really explain why she'd want Vamp to order in those suicide geckos though, but I guess maybe she figured Snake would help her use them against Vamp somehow? Either way, it does seem like Snake will have to find a way out of this place before the explosions commence, and Otacon has a solution. They're going to use Rex. It will take a bit of time for Otacon to get Rex going again, however, so in the meantime, Snake will have to face off against Vamp. Seeing as he's been able to cheat death more than once though, you may wonder how this would even be possible, but there's a surprisingly simple and incredibly stupid solution. Stick him with the nanomachine suppressors. Yup, while Vamp will just keep reviving if you only try to shoot him down, he's actually just as vulnerable as the rest of us, maybe even more so. You see, all you have to do here is find a way to grab him and then stick him with your syringe, as this will immediately end the fight. Why? Because now he's no longer protected by his nanomachines. Are you fucking kidding me? I mean, what the hell? You're seriously telling us that all of Vamp's seemingly supernatural powers, all the times he managed to recover from fatal injuries, all of the mysterious and unexplainable aspects that make up the very core of his character, were all just a result of his fucking nanomachines? That's the dumbest thing I've heard since this verbal diarrhea!
Without the midichlorians, life could not exist, and we would have no knowledge of the Force.
Honestly, this is such bullshit, I don't even know where to begin. How exactly could nanomachines nullify and restore the effects of getting shot in the head, not just once, but multiple times? How could they give someone the ability to run on water or up the side of buildings? And why the hell wouldn't anyone else have these same abilities? Fine, so Vamp's nanos are supposedly of some sort of special variety, but come on, this still makes absolutely no sense. It also makes this and consequently any previous Vamp battle seem like giant slaps in the face, as he could have been stopped all along with just one injection from a tiny needle. Yeah, really makes those encounters feel all the more worth the effort, doesn't it? So yeah, I guess Vamp's no longer immortal, but before Snake can finish him, those suicide geckos arrive and they're set to blow. As luck would have it though, they're immediately followed by Raiden, who cuts them all down way before they're even an issue. Yep, he's apparently been all patched up as he's good as new, and just in time for a conveniently dramatic entrance as well. Unfortunately, that was just the first wave of geckos, as quite a few more show up shortly thereafter. As Vamp challenges him to a duel, Raiden decides to accept as they square off, while Snake keeps the geckos at bay. What follows is a rather interesting but also kind of strange sequence with both a cutscene and a gecko battle going on at the same time. That's right, the game suddenly goes split screen on us as we actually have to fight off the geckos on one side of the screen, while a cutscene featuring Vamp and Raiden's duel is displayed on the other. I guess this is kind of a neat idea, and it's not like it exactly ruins anything, but I honestly don't see the point of it either. In fact, it might even be a bit distracting, so it just feels a bit unnecessary. In any case, the geckos are pretty easily dealt with, as is Vamp. After he's given one more syringe to put him out of his misery for good though, it seems he's not the only one who's been living on borrowed time.
Cancer. I shouldn't even be alive right now. The nanomachines have kept it from progressing, but there's nothing more they can do. With the nanomachines gone, time will unfreeze and begin to flow again.
What are you saying?
What is she saying? Oh, she's just talking about a watch. You see, it stopped earlier, symbolically freezing time, but now it's suddenly working again, meaning time is once again flowing. Well, you asked a stupid question. No, it seems Naomi is in fact dying as she uses the syringe to deactivate her nanomachines and end her own life. This is actually a pretty heartbreaking scene, especially in regards to Otacon. I mean, this is the third time he's losing someone he loves right in front of his eyes, and I always lose it when the music ramps up, the flashback starts, and Otacon tearfully wonders why this keeps happening. That said, I do think it's almost silly how fast he manages to pull himself together and move on, considering he's relatively fine just a few seconds later. Yeah, I guess you could argue he's just focusing on the mission as some sort of coping mechanism or whatever, but he still goes from absolute devastation to steely-eyed determination faster than I go through a bag of crisps. Either way, this leads us to a pretty badass moment, as for the first and I think only time in the entire franchise, we finally get to take control of an actual Metal Gear. Not just any Metal Gear either, but the most iconic and provably best Metal Gear of the bunch. Seriously, I don't think any fan of this franchise could help but squee in utter delight upon reaching this dream come true moment. Well, okay, so you do only get to use Rex for 2 relatively short sequences, but I think that's reasonable enough. The first one basically involves stomping through a series of hallways to get to the outside, mowing down as many geckos as you can along the way. You do have a bit of a time limit as well, but unless you just don't move, it should be pretty easy to beat. Rex also has 3 weapons with which you can deal with the geckos, including a laser and a missile launcher, but you really only need one, the Gatling gun. Sure, the others can be useful, but the Gatling gun has unlimited ammo, it never overheats, and it's the fastest, most precise, and easiest to use. In other words, there's no point in switching to anything else. Once you reach the exit though, Raiden decides to get out of Rex in order to hold off the remaining geckos, which only results in getting him trapped in some falling rubble when they inevitably self-destruct. No, really, if Raiden had just stayed put, the geckos would still blow up, but he would have been fine and Snake would still have some backup. How was this a better plan? Before Snake can even check to see if Raiden is still alive though, Liquid suddenly arrives aboard Metal Gear Ray, and yes, this is going exactly where you think it is. Finally, we're going to find out which Metal Gear is truly the best. Which of these beasts is really the superior version? Which Metal Gear is truly the ultimate... Spoiler, it's Rex. Oh, I'll go into a few more details, but yeah, Rex fucking trounces Ray, and not just because that's what the plot demands. I've always maintained that Rex is much more impressive and capable than Ray, and in this fight, they prove that beyond a shadow of a doubt. Unless you somehow manage to lose, I guess. You probably won't though, because again, Ray kinda sucks. You basically just have to fire at it until it cowers and or gets stunned, then you can grab it and cut into it with your laser. Rinse and repeat this a few times, and before you know it, Ray goes down like a wet sock. Okay, so Ray can get in a few hits once in a while, and it is able to duck underwater, but it still ain't got nothing on Rex. It doesn't really matter that you complete his spank Liquid and his Ray though, as he still makes it out unscathed. While he's running away from Snake, who injures himself trying to pursue him, Liquid climbs onto a crane attached to his floating fortress, which suddenly emerges from the sea. He then attempts to crush Snake by charging towards him, as Snake apparently just sits down and gives up. Seriously, for whatever reason, Snake decides there's no point in even trying anymore, as he just falls to his knees and refuses to move. Yeah, he's injured, but that didn't really stop him before. Maybe we're supposed to think he suffered another seizure or something, but they certainly don't make it look like that, so I honestly don't get why he just collapses like this. As it happens though, it seems Raiden is also still alive, although he is trapped underneath that pile of rubble. He therefore decides to take rather drastic action, as he not only dislocates his shoulder in order to reach his blade, he then proceeds to dismember himself by cutting off his entire arm. That's gotta sting a little. It certainly doesn't kill him though, as Raiden then somehow manages to not only get over to Snake in time, but he actually holds back Liquid's ship. Now, I know Raiden has enhanced strength and all, but this still seems pretty damn impossible. I mean, even Rex would be crushed under this massive warship, so I seriously doubt one little cyborg would pose much of a hindrance. Raiden does somehow manage to pull this off though, but he's losing ground fast, which is to be expected. He also manages to snap Snake out of whatever trance he was in as he finally starts moving again, dragging himself to safety. Unfortunately, Raiden can't hold back the encroaching fortress any longer as he gets crushed before he has any hope of getting away. As sad as this may or may not be though, I do have to say that it is at least a fairly fitting and rather heroic end for a pretty decent character. Okay, so if he had just stayed on board Rex, or if Snake had just gotten off his ass, he'd probably still be alive, but as is, he at least went out in a rather dignified fashion. Or at least he would've if the developers didn't completely puss out. You see, even though it seems pretty damn obvious that Raiden is way beyond saving at this point, they couldn't possibly let him die. No. That would actually make a bit of sense and be somewhat fitting, but I guess they're going with the Snowvillia's way of thinking.
The heroes never die.
Yeah, even though he was clearly crushed beyond recognition, even though the only thing that seemed to be left of him was his fucking blade, he could easily still be alive. If he was a fucking cartoon cat, there's no way in hell they intended for Raiden to make it out of this alive. Or if they did, they made a shit job of making it even remotely believable. That is what happens though. Raiden somehow manages to survive what is very clearly a death scene, though we don't get to see him again for quite a while. Instead, Mei Ling suddenly arrives with the Missouri as it fires on Liquid's ship. This doesn't exactly cause much damage, although it does make Liquid and his Outer Haven retreat for now. After passing out from yet another seizure, getting picked up by Otacon and presumably recuperating for a bit, Snake and the others meet aboard the Missouri for a briefing held by Mei Ling. It seems Outer Haven has managed to get quite far away, but as Mei Ling explains, it's still possible for them to catch up to and stop Liquid before he can fire his nuke. The thing is that Outer Haven will not only have to resurface in order to fire its newly mounted railgun, it will have to do so at a rather specific location in order to successfully hit JD. This apparently means that it will have to remain stationary for a relatively long time, during which the Missouri and its crew should be able to intercept and infiltrate this fortress. Now you might wonder, as Meryl does, if they really need to infiltrate Outer Haven at all. Shouldn't it be enough to just destroy the railgun from the safety of the Missouri? Well, no, because this would still leave Liquid with control over most of the SOP system, and as such, the only course of action is to destroy GW from within Outer Haven first, and then destroy the ship itself. Wait, what? No, really, I know I'm kinda dense and all, but that doesn't really seem to add up. Just think about it. If they did manage to destroy the railgun from the outside before Liquid fires it, his plan is pretty much fucked, right? If they then also destroy Outer Haven itself, shouldn't GW also be destroyed? Seriously, why the hell wouldn't that work? However much or little sense this actually makes though, it is the plan they're sticking with. Basically, a strike team will be launched onto Outer Haven using these weird catapult things once it surfaces. This team will then find a way into GW's server room and destroy the AI with a worm cluster apparently created by Sunny with a bit of help from Naomi. Yeah, this entire plan is apparently based on intel Naomi left for Otacon, which was the reason she wanted to be rescued. She also intended for Otacon to finish her worm cluster, but after finding out just how special Sunny was, she ended up getting her assistance instead. We never really find out why Naomi then went back to Liquid, but I guess she just didn't want to tip him off or something. Even with all this intel though, getting to GW isn't exactly going to be easy. Not only will the ship be crawling with enemy combatants, but it also seems like the strike team will have to contend with a rather problematic security feature if they want to reach the server room.
The corridor leading to GW is defended by directed energy weapons that emit certain types of microwaves.
Did you say microwaves?
That's right. And at that frequency, the waves will start to evaporate any living person within range.
That's right, in order to reach GW, someone has to go through what is basically a giant microwave oven. Even though they could just send in the Mark III on its own. No, really, these microwaves apparently won't affect machines, and as Otacon's little helper ends up doing pretty much all the work in there anyway, it just seems entirely unnecessary to send in an actual person. Before we get to all that though, I do want to mention one more fairly insignificant part of this mission briefing that nevertheless always confused the crap out of me. I still don't get what the hell it's all about, as it just doesn't make any sense. You see, there's this moment during Mei Ling's briefing where she walks past Akiba, and for some bewildering reason well, just take a look.
The enemy relies entirely on electronic means of threat detection, so they won't be able to see the Missouri until they surface.
Akiba!
What the hell was that? Did Akiba really just try to grope Mei Ling's butt? Why? Sure, she has a pretty great arse and all, but you can't just grab someone's booty because it looks good. I mean, what the fuck's wrong with you? Seriously, is this supposed to be funny? Because we're not just talking about a clumsy misunderstanding here.
No, we're talking about sexual harassment here.
and I don't have to take it.
Anyway, when Outer Haven surfaces and the inevitable firefight between it and the Missouri ensues, Snake, Meryl, and Akiba are literally launched towards it via their personal catapults. Unfortunately, Snake and Meryl somehow land in completely different areas of the ship, and Akiba actually ends up in the water. Not exactly the most precise infiltration method in the world, huh? At least Snake and Meryl are on board though, as Snake proceeds towards the server room after confirming that Meryl is okay. This does involve dodging quite a few frogs and 1 or 2 geckos, but there's not really anything that's too much of a challenge to overcome here either. Besides, you should be able to acquire quite a substantial arsenal here if you need a bit of extra help. Yeah, remember how I mentioned that you save 20% on your Drebin purchases on Wednesdays and Sundays? Well, now you actually save 50% regardless of what day it is. I guess this does allow you to grab some good deals and all, but at this point in the game, you should already have more than you need anyway. Still, it is a good chance to get some additional resources. Whatever loadout you choose to equip yourself with, Snake will eventually make his way to this command center where he finds Meryl seemingly unconscious on the floor. Before he can provide her with any assistance though, he's suddenly surrounded by frogs. While the following firefight can be a bit hectic and cramped, it is pretty much just the lead-in to our final beast battle. That's right, after dealing with this initial wave of frogs and going to check on Meryl, she suddenly gets back on her feet, but not exactly by her own power. No, it seems someone is literally pulling her strings, as she appears to be suspended and controlled via some kind of semi-transparent webbing or something. Where the hell did that come from? Seriously, I get that this is just Screaming Mantis doing a whole psychic control thing and all, but how does that explain those strings? I thought she was supposed to be controlling people with her mind, not some sort of thread she just conjures up out of nothing. I mean, she's supposed to be a mantis, not a spider! And no, it's not like this is just some sort of metaphysical manifestation of her powers or whatever. These are actual physical strings that can not only be seen, but that can be interacted with and even cut down. That doesn't sound very psychic to me. Magic and completely impossible, sure, but certainly not psychic. Like I mentioned though, this is all the work of Screaming Mantis. While she, like her namesake before her, attempts to force Meryl to shoot herself, she's stopped from completing this action not by Snake, but by Akiba, who suddenly appears and shoots down the string on Meryl's arm. Still not sure how that actually works or how the hell Akiba is even alive, but sure, let's just go with it. As it happens though, Mantis seems to have a few other tricks up her sleeves, as Akiba is then shot several times by some of the frogs Snake shot down just a few moments ago. Yeah, apparently Mantis can even control dead bodies, and yet she can't seem to control Akiba. Really, she fires several doll bullets at him to no avail, but I'm sure that doesn't mean anything, right? Oh, and you didn't hear that wrong, by the way. I did say Mantis fires doll bullets, which is the best description I can come up with. You see, she actually has these 2 dolls bearing the likeness of Psycho Mantis and the Sorrow that are somehow capable of shooting these balls of energy that supposedly give her control over her targets. No, I have no idea how this works either. What I do know is that these dolls are also the only way to defeat Mantis. In essence, you have to split the time spent fighting her between taking care of her undead puppets, protecting Meryl from her control, and yes, taking away her dolls. To do this, you simply have to shoot off the strings she uses to carry them, which might take a while, but it isn't really all that difficult. Once you've obtained the dolls and shaken Mantis down, it seems her suit actually has a life of its own as it suddenly puts itself back together. Yeah, apparently Psycho Mantis really did exist within Screaming Mantis, as his spirit briefly appears in what is essentially just a throwaway gag. Sure, fans might get a bit of a kick out of this, but it is incredibly silly and entirely unnecessary. Anyway, after Mantis has said his piece and evaporates because why not, Meryl says she'll hold off the remaining frogs while Snake goes after GW. While she more than holds her own for quite some time, Meryl does eventually start running out of bullets. Just as she's about to be shot, however, Akiba suddenly comes to the rescue in yet another dramatically convenient reappearance. While helping Meryl re-equip and reload, Akiba also reveals his big secret. Remember how he was unaffected by Liquid's SOP tests or how Mantis couldn't control him? Well, as it turns out, there is a reason for all of that, and considering how heavily they've hinted at it throughout the game, you might already have an inkling as to what it might be.
I don't have any nanomachines in me. What? Every time we had mandatory shots, I ducked out.
That's right, Akiba doesn't have any nanomachines. Now, this does technically explain how he was unaffected by those tests and all, but it still makes no damn sense. You're seriously telling me that this one guy somehow managed to avoid not just one, but a full decade's worth of mandatory military checkups without ever getting caught? Yeah, I don't fucking think so. It also turns out that Akiba is technically a returning character. Yeah, remember that god Meryl punched out when she escaped her cell in Shadow Moses? That's him. It seems Akiba really liked getting his ass kicked though, as he apparently fell in love with Meryl after that, which is why he joined her unit as soon as he got the opportunity. Yeah, nothing creepy about that, is there? As if that wasn't bad enough, Akiba then asked Meryl to marry him. Unsurprisingly, she does reject this insane offer, but only so she can turn around and propose to him instead. Yup, even though they have basically no chemistry and Akiba is possibly the biggest creep on the planet, they still agree to get married because I guess we have to shoehorn in some kind of forced romance, don't we? In any case, while those two discuss their wedding plans in one of the cringiest scenes ever, Snake eventually makes it to the microwave corridor. Before he can enter it though, he suffers yet another seizure, and quite a bad one at that. In fact, his syringes don't even help, and several frogs are closing in on him. Cue yet another perfectly timed appearance of a helping hand. Or rather, foot, I guess. Yup, Raiden is back, and although he no longer has any arms, he's apparently able to control and direct any nearby electrical power with his mind instead. This allows him to take out quite a few frogs, as Snake also manages to get back on his feet. He then heads into the microwaves as Raiden vows to prevent him from being followed. Which it probably wouldn't be anyway, but whatever. As expected, Snake's trek through this radiated hallway turns out to be a rather painful experience, but not just for him. While you initially just have to move forward by pushing the analog stick, Snake will eventually get weaker and begin to crawl, requiring you to also push the triangle button as rapidly as you can for quite a significant period of time. Oh, you might not think this sounds so bad, but trust me, hammering that button for I don't know how many minutes is such a pain in the arm. Honestly, it's kind of an ingenious way of portraying the pain and struggle Snake is going through, as the player also has to deal with quite a severe burn. A comparatively small and rather localized burn, sure, but it's still a pretty clever idea. You should still be able to make it through this oven though, after which Snake finds himself in front of GW, which is apparently some sort of weird digital graveyard. Seriously, the room is filled with a bunch of tombstones, and there are even some kind of holographic flowers around them. No idea what the hell kind of purpose any of that serves, but look how pretty! Anyway, while it initially seems like Otacon might not be able to upload the virus in time as the server room suddenly fills with scarabs, it does finish uploading at just the right time as per classic action movie regulations. As a result, Liquid's forces start dropping like flies, but unbeknownst to anyone, Naomi's worm apparently has an extra little trick in store.
The virus you uploaded is using GW as a conduit to annihilate the entire AI network. It's set to destroy all 4 AIs, along with JD, the core that tied them all together. I've set this video to play back once they're all gone.
Yep, Naomi's virus not only destroyed GW as planned, it actually wiped out the entire SOP system. Now, this might raise a few questions either way, but the one I'm left asking is, when exactly did Naomi record this message? I know, seems like a weird thing to focus on, but just think about it. Naomi must have recorded this after getting Sunny's help, as she mentions her in this message, and it appears to be filmed aboard Outer Haven. If that's the case though, this message couldn't possibly be part of this virus, as that was handed over to Sunny well before this was filmed. Seriously, the timeline here just doesn't work.
You've created a time paradox.
Either way, this ultimately leads to one more set piece and our last bit of gameplay. After passing out in the server room, Snake eventually wakes up on one of Outer Haven's towers, as it seems Liquid has dragged him up there for one final hand-to-hand battle to the death. After he and Snake stick each other with a few syringes first. Why? To display their health bars? In any case, this last beatdown basically involves hammering the melee button as you try to land as many punches and kicks as you can. You do have to be rather careful with your timing though, as even the tiniest mistakes will cost you. Seriously, miss a few punches or mess up your combos at all, and Liquid will basically get a few free hits. Still, it is a pretty decent fight overall. Once the battle reaches its final stages though, it kinda devolves into a series of QuickTime-like button prompts. You see, as they weaken, Snake and Liquid move less and less, and mostly end up delivering one punch at a time, the receiver of which is determined by the timing of your button presses. I guess this still works, but I would have preferred a straight-up fight all the way to the end. Snake does eventually prevail though, after which Otacon once again picks him up with his helicopter. As they're leaving the battlefield, Otacon also explains that while the deletion of the SOP system could have crippled society as a whole, Sunny managed to rewrite part of Naomi's code in order to keep vital infrastructures intact. In other words, everything has wrapped up rather nicely. All of which should mean that the game is pretty much over, right? Well, you'd think so considering there's no more gameplay, just a series of cutscenes, but this epilogue actually lasts for over an hour. You really don't think that might be a tad excessive? Oh, it'd be one thing if this epilogue only contained essential material, but I'm sorry, it's mostly just unnecessary, melodramatic, and insanely long-winded filler. Yes, there are things here worth mentioning, and no, it's not all terrible, but come on, more than an hour of uninterrupted cutscenes isn't exactly reasonable, is it? Like I said though, there are some things worth noting here, but most of it can be narrowed down to a few bullet points. For starters, we get to take part in Meryl and Akiba's wedding, where Meryl finally decides to give Campbell a second chance. We also learn from Drebin that Rat Patrol was actually created by the Patriots, which their name is an anagram for, if you spell both a bit wrong. It also turns out that Raiden has received some fairly significant surgery at some hospital, as Rose and her son pays him a visit. She apparently has a rather important revelation for him, as it turns out that she and Campbell never actually had a child together as he was led to believe. No, that was just a lie meant to protect Raiden's family from the Patriots, as this boy is and always was Raiden's son. Although I'm fairly certain Raiden wouldn't have accepted all this quite as easily as he does, it's still rather nice to see him reunite with his family like this. The next scene isn't nearly as pleasant though, as it seems Snake's inevitable end is finally upon us. Now, this is pretty powerful and sad enough on its own, but the next scene is where I always lose it. Honestly, I still can't sit through this without tearing up, and even thinking about it is getting me quite choked up. You see, back at the wedding, everyone is still enjoying the festivities, until Sonny asks Otacon a simple, innocent, and yet completely devastating question.
When is Snake coming back?
Snake... is sick. So he went on a trip to help him get better.
We're not going with him?
No. He needs some time to rest.
Are you crying, Uncle Hal?
Of course he is, and he's not the only one. Seriously, you might think I'm faking this, but I promise you, these are real tears, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. If having an emotional reaction to the tragic death of a long-time beloved character makes me any less of a man, then call me Giselle, because I don't want to be part of a gender that thinks feelings is the F word. Admittedly, my reaction here is a bit undermined by the fact that this still isn't the ending. Or they may start rolling the credits, but why stick to what was clearly the original plan and actually have the hero die at the end, when you can cave to whatever pressure or fear that probably led to this, and not only have him survive, but then also have a special appearance by Big Boss? I'm so not kidding! You see, even though we saw this guy explode at the end of Metal Gear 2, and no, I'm not letting that go, Eva was apparently able to recover what was left of his body from some secure Patriot facility and stitch him back together using parts of Solidus and Liquid. This was all done around the time GW was infected in MGS2, meaning Big Boss has actually been alive for quite some time. This obviously means that the husk Eva had in Europe was a fake, but who could pass for Big Boss even on a genetic level? Why, his perfect clone, of course, none other than Solidus. The game does actually contain a clue about this, as if you look closely, you'll notice that his body is missing its left eye, whereas Big Boss lost his right. Nice hint, I guess, but this still doesn't really add up. For one thing, I think it'd be fairly well known which eye Big Boss actually lost, so the fact that no one ever realizes that it suddenly seems to have switched sockets is a bit of a stretch. Okay, so I guess that might not be the sort of thing you'd necessarily notice, but I kinda think it would be. I mean, it's not exactly a missing birthmark, is it? It's his fucking eyes! I suppose you could argue that most of the people involved actually did know this already though, as it turns out that even Ocelot being taken over by the soul of Liquid was part of the plan. Yeah, in order to fool the Patriots, Ocelot somehow used hypnosis and his own nanomachines to make himself believe he actually was Liquid. No, I don't really get the point of that either. In any case, as their plan seems to have worked, Big Boss eventually managed to find the one thing he was really after all along, namely Major Zero. He's not exactly much of a threat anymore though, as he's essentially just a barely conscious old man stuck in a wheelchair. Big Boss still feels the need to kill him though, because... honestly, it's not clear why that's necessary, but closure, I guess? Either way, once Zero is gone, it seems Big Boss isn't doing so well either, as he falls to his knees while revealing that the new Fox Die in Snake's system is what actually killed Eva and Ocelot, and that it's about to do the same to him. There is a bit of a silver lining here though, as it seems this new virus also has quite a beneficial side effect.
The new Fox Die is uprooting the old. Naomi confirmed it in her follow-up. The mutants are receding. Before long, they'll be gone entirely. Does that mean the mutant strain won't cause an epidemic?
Well, he did just say the mutant strain is disappearing, so obviously everyone is still at risk of being infected. By a cold, most likely, because the fox dye certainly won't be spreading. How the hell could you think otherwise? Well, Big Boss does say that the new fox dye could mutate one day as well, but it's rather unlikely that Snake can live long enough for that to actually happen. He also urges Snake to live his last days to the fullest before struggling his way over to the boss's grave. After mustering up one final salute in her honor, Big Boss then collapses as Snake helps him light and enjoy his last cigar. On the whole, I still really enjoy this game. Oh, it has more than a few problems, but calling it bad would be quite a stretch. As a matter of fact, I still think the gameplay mechanics might be the smoothest the franchise has ever had, and most of the cutscenes are very well put together. There are also plenty of unforgettable and or emotional moments, especially if you're already a fan. That said, it is a bit difficult to recommend this to newcomers, as even ardent fans are known to get quite confused at certain points. It's also hard to defend the insanely excessive use of cutscenes, and the bulk of the dialogue is also unnecessarily verbose and pseudo-poetic. Sure, some of it still works, but I can't deny that this game is padded with a huge amount of pretty inane filler. Then there's the way they cop out of certain deaths. Okay, so I don't really have any proof for this, but it just seems obvious that both Raiden and certainly Snake were meant to die in the end. That's not to say the ending we get is horrible, but it just would have been much more memorable, powerful, and ballsy if they'd actually stuck to their guns and axed off these characters as intended. Like I said though, I still like the game, and I do think it's among the better releases the franchise has had. It also does a pretty decent job of wrapping up almost every loose end the series ever created, even if it does some of that in a rather convoluted manner. Ultimately, I think the game is well worth a purchase, and that it ended things on a slightly flawed but still very satisfactory note. And yes, this really was the end, not just for this game, but the franchise as a whole. Kojima was adamant about moving on to other projects, and with everything wrapped up rather tightly, it was clear the time had come to say goodbye. Oh, wait, that'd be a bit too dignified, wouldn't it? Yeah, let's just bleed the franchise dry and go out in a complete farce instead.